Saturday afternoons in Atlanta had a particular sound. It was not just noise. It was impatience. Shopping carts rattling against metal rails. Children whining for candy near checkout aisles. Phones ringing with urgency that felt exaggerated. People sighing loudly, as if the universe personally delayed them. Inside Greenridge Market on Fairburn Road, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled like bread, detergent, and exhaustion. Register 6 had the longest line. At the very front stood a man no one noticed, until they needed someone to blame. He was tall but slightly stooped, like someone who had carried invisible weight for too long. His jacket was brown, worn at the elbows. His trousers were clean but creased from age, not style. His shoes were polished, but old. In his basket, a 5-pound bag of rice. 2 cans of beans. Cooking oil. A loaf of wheat bread. 3 tomatoes. 1 onion. Basic food. The kind bought by people calculating every dollar. His name was Tavian Cairo DeLon. But nobody in that line knew that. To them, he was just another ordinary man holding up Saturday. He placed his items gently onto the conveyor belt. The cashier, a young woman with calm eyes and steady hands, began scanning. Beep. 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 Behind him, someone exhaled dramatically. Can this line move any slower? The voice belonged to Zeraphine Cade. Her perfume arrived before her presence. Expensive scent. Sharp tone. Designer handbag tucked under her arm like a trophy. She checked her phone again. 11:48 a.m. She had a nail appointment at 12:30. Life was unfair. Meanwhile, Tavian stared quietly at the display screen as the total climbed. $23.47. The cashier looked up at him. That'll be $23.47, sir. He nodded. Reached into his jacket pocket. Paused. Checked again. His fingers moved slower the second time. Then his trousers. Left side. Right side. Inside lining. His brow tightened slightly. A small breath left him. I'm sorry, he said softly. I must have forgotten my wallet. There was no performance in his voice. No theatrics. Just quiet embarrassment. The line behind him stiffened. Zeraphine stepped forward. You've got to be kidding me. Her voice carried down the aisle. People have places to be. Tavian turned slightly. I apologize. It wasn't intentional. Well, that doesn't help the rest of US, does it? A man 2 spots back avoided eye contact. A mother with twins pretended to reorganize her cart. An elderly gentleman shook his head but said nothing. The store manager approached quickly. Sir, if you're unable to pay, we'll need you to step aside. Tavian nodded slowly. Yes, of course. He began placing the items back into the basket. He moved carefully. Respectfully. As if even in embarrassment, he would not allow himself to become bitter. Then. I'll pay for it. The voice was gentle. But firm. The cashier. Her name tag read. Adarinsula Valles. She reached into her apron pocket. Pulled out a folded $20 bill. Then coins. Quarters. Dimes. Nickels. She counted carefully. $23.47. Exactly. The manager blinked. Adarinsula, you don't have to. I know. She slid the money into the register. The store grew quiet. Not normal quiet. A different quiet. The kind that happens when something pure enters a room that wasn't expecting it. Zeraphine scoffed. That's your money to waste. Adarinsula ignored her. She bagged the groceries carefully. Handed them to Tavian. "Here you go, sir." Tavian did not reach for the bags immediately. He looked at her instead. Studied her face. No regret. No hesitation. Just kindness. "Why?" he asked quietly. She shrugged. "You needed food. But that was your money. I'll eat later." She gave a small smile. "My mother used to say the hand that gives never stays empty." The word struck something deep inside him. A memory. An echo of another voice. His father's voice. "A river does not drink its own water." Tavian swallowed. He picked up the groceries. Walked toward the exit. The automatic doors slid open. Warm air brushed his face. He stepped outside. And stopped. Inside the store, people began talking again. Murmurs. Small laughs. Relief that the inconvenience had ended. But 30 seconds later, the doors opened again. Tavian walked back in. Slower this time. Intentional. He approached register 6 once more. The room shifted again. He set the grocery bags down. Reached into the inner seam of his jacket. Pulled out a slim black phone. Pressed one button. "Armand. Bring the car around." The cashier frowned slightly. Zeraphine rolled her eyes. "Oh please." 30 seconds later. A black Mercedes Maybach rolled to the front of Greenridge Market. The driver stepped out. Suit tailored perfectly. Polished shoes. He entered and handed Tavian a leather envelope. The store went silent. Not curious silence. Stunned silence. Tavian opened the envelope. Removed a single card. Placed it gently on the counter in front of Adarinsula. "My name," he said calmly, "is Tavian Cairo Delon." The manager's face went pale. Zeraphine blinked rapidly. "I am the majority owner of this property." He let that sit. "I came here today without my wallet on purpose." A ripple moved through the crowd. "I wanted to see what happens when a man cannot pay for rice and bread." He turned toward the line. "You watched." He turned to Zeraphine. "You judged." Then back to Adarinsula. "You gave." His voice softened. "You gave the only money you had." The store felt smaller. $23.47 had just become the most powerful number in the room. Tavian held up the receipt. "This," he said quietly, "is the most valuable transaction of my life." An elderly man began clapping. Slowly. Then others joined. Until the entire aisle erupted in applause. Zeraphine stood frozen. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. And Adarinsula? Her hands trembled slightly. Not because he was wealthy. But because she had not known she was being tested. And she had passed without knowing it was an exam. Long before that grocery store. Long before the applause. Long before $23.47 became sacred. Tavian Cairo Delon had already built an empire. But he had quietly buried his heart. He was born in St. Louis, Senegal. Not into wealth. Not into power. Into salt air, wooden boats, and cracked hands. His father, Maury Delon, was a fisherman. Not the kind with big nets and engines. The kind with patience. The kind who mended ropes at night under a lantern. His mother, Alima, sold smoked fish at the market. She could calculate faster than any machine and detect a liar before they finished a sentence. They did not have much. But they had dignity. One evening when Tavian was 11, he asked his father something that stayed with him forever. "Baba, why do you give fish away sometimes?" "We need money." His father smiled, not offended. Just patient. A river does not drink its own water. A tree does not eat its own fruit. If we only keep what we have, it rots. Young Tavian did not fully understand. But he remembered. At 19, he left Senegal with a scholarship and $50 in his pocket. He arrived in America with an accent, a thin coat, and dreams too large for his suitcase. He slept on a mattress on the floor. Worked night shifts unloading trucks. Studied engineering during the day. He was underestimated often. But never outworked. At 28, he launched his first logistics company. At 32, he lost almost everything in a bad shipping contract. At 33, he rebuilt. At 40, he was a millionaire. At 53, he was worth over $4 billion. Skyscrapers carried his company name. Ports operated under his contracts. Politicians shook his hand. But none of that protected his heart. Love humiliated him 3 times. The first was Celestine Armand. Elegant. Brilliant. Soft-spoken. She told him she loved how grounded he was. She loved his humility. Until one quarter when the market crashed and he lost nearly $200 million in valuation. Not permanently. But visibly. Investors panicked. Headlines screamed. Celestine changed. I didn't sign up for instability, she told him one night over dinner. He looked at her carefully. You knew I was an entrepreneur. Yes, but I thought you were past risk. Past risk. As if life had levels you could graduate from. She left 2 weeks later. When the market recovered months after, she sent a message. Maybe we moved too quickly. He never replied. The second was worse. Marielle Dupont. Charming. Funny. Warm. She volunteered at events. Spoke kindly to waiters. Or so he thought. Until his financial controller flagged irregular transfers. $472,000 sent over 8 months. To a charitable foundation. The foundation didn't exist. The money went to her former boyfriend's failing restaurant. When confronted, she didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She shrugged. You have billions. You didn't even notice. That sentence cut deeper than betrayal. It revealed how she saw him. Not as a man. But as a vault. The third nearly broke him. Her name was Avalis Moreau. A pediatric nurse. Soft-spoken. Faithful. Humble. Or so she appeared. They dated 2 years. She met his mother. She cooked traditional food. She spoke about children. He believed again. Then his legal team brought him a document. A draft prenuptial agreement. Not written by him. Written by her. Before he had proposed. It guaranteed her $60 million if the marriage ended within 5 years. 5 years. She was planning the exit before the entrance. When he asked her about it, she cried. Said it was just protection. But the trust was gone. He realized something painful. He had been evaluating women by how they treated him. Not how they treated strangers. And that was the flaw. Because anyone can be kind to a billionaire. The real test is how someone treats a man who looks like he has nothing. That thought became a plan. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just simple. He would go somewhere ordinary. Dress ordinary. Carry no wallet. No cards. No identifiers. And he would observe. Not to embarrass anyone. Not to punish anyone. But to see. To see who helps. To see who watches. To see who judges. And maybe. Just maybe. To see who gives without knowing she's being watched. 3 days later, he left his wallet at home on purpose. He did not expect $23.47 to change his life. He did not expect a cashier with tired eyes and steady hands to become the answer to a dream his mother had whispered across the ocean. But sometimes destiny doesn't arrive at galas. Sometimes it stands behind register 6. And costs exactly $23.47. Before she was the cashier who gave away her last $20. Before applause filled a grocery aisle. Before a billionaire said her kindness was priceless. Adarinsula Valles was just a girl trying not to fall apart. She was born in Enugu, Nigeria. Not into poverty. But not into ease either. Her father, Mateo Valles, was a secondary school mathematics teacher. Quiet, disciplined, deeply principled. Her mother, Ebel, sold fabric at a local market. Bright fabrics. Bold colors. She laughed loudly and loved fiercely. Their house was small but always warm. Dinner was never silent. Her father would ask, "What did you learn today?" And if she said, "Nothing," he would reply, "Then you wasted a day you cannot get back." From a young age, Adarinsula loved numbers. Numbers were stable. They did not shout. They did not lie. They did not disappear. When she was 16, her father told her, "You will leave this country one day. You will build something bigger than I ever could." She believed him. 2 years later, she earned a student visa to America. She was 19. Excited. Terrified. Determined. She promised her parents she would send money home. And she did. Every month. Even when she barely had enough for herself. Then the phone call came. 2:13 a.m. Unknown number. A male voice. Flat. Clinical. "Are you the daughter of Mateo and Ebel Valles?" Her throat tightened. "Yes. There has been an accident." The words shattered her. Her parents died on the Lagos-Benin Expressway. Instantly. No goodbye. No final words. Just silence. She sat on the floor of her tiny apartment in Atlanta and screamed into her hands. She wanted to go home. But she had no money for emergency travel. She wanted to see their faces one last time. But she couldn't. And the guilt swallowed her. "I should have been there." She repeated it for months. Then came the second blow. Her younger brother, Maliko. He was 15. He went to live with an aunt in Lagos. At first, the aunt sounded kind on the phone. But Maliko's voice changed over time. Quieter. Shorter. One night he whispered, "She makes me sleep on the floor." Another night. "She says I eat too much." Another. "She slapped me today." Adarinsula's chest burned with helpless rage. She was barely surviving in America. Working part-time jobs. Sending what little she could. Now she needed to bring him over. Legally. It would take paperwork. Lawyers. Fees. Time. She took a second job. Then a third shift on weekends. She stopped buying new clothes. Stopped going out. Stopped eating full meals. Every spare dollar went into immigration processing. 2 years. 2 long, brutal years. But she did it. When Maliko walked out of the airport in Atlanta, thinner but smiling, she nearly collapsed with relief. He hugged her and cried into her shoulder. "You came for me. I will always come for you." From that moment, her life stopped being about herself. It became about survival. For both of them. Her daily routine became mechanical. Wake up at 5 a.m. Bus to Greenridge Market. Work register from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Quick snack, sometimes just crackers. Bus downtown. Clean office buildings from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. Come home exhausted. Help Maliko with homework. Study accounting online past midnight. Sleep 4 hours. Repeat. She didn't complain. Because complaining doesn't change bills. Maliko wanted to be an engineer. He loved machines. Took apart broken electronics and rebuilt them. Sometimes she would watch him studying at the kitchen table and think, he must not feel the weight I feel. So she carried it for him. Money was always calculated. Rent. Utilities. Bus pass. School fees. Groceries. She kept a small envelope hidden in her dresser labeled, emergency. It rarely had more than $40 in it. The $20 in her apron that Saturday? That was not extra money. That was survival money. Lunch money. Backup money. Security money. But when she saw Tavian patting his pockets, she didn't see a stranger. She saw her father once forgetting his wallet at the market and laughing awkwardly. She saw her brother looking embarrassed when he couldn't afford school supplies. She saw dignity on the verge of being crushed. And she recognized that look. The look of a man trying not to feel small. That is why she moved before she thought. Not because she was reckless. But because she understood hunger. Understood humiliation. Understood what it means to stand in public feeling exposed. When Zeraphine insulted him, Adarinsula felt something twist inside her. Not anger. Protection. Because cruelty is loud. And kindness sometimes needs someone brave enough to be louder. What nobody in that store knew was that the night before, her landlord had sent a message. Rent would increase next month. An extra $150. She had stayed up until 2 a.m. calculating numbers. Trying to stretch something that would not stretch. She was tired. Financially stretched. Emotionally worn. And yet, she gave. Without calculation. Because her mother used to say, if your heart tells you to help, don't let your fear argue. So she gave. Not knowing cameras were recording. Not knowing destiny was watching. Not knowing that the man in front of her owned the very building she worked in. She only knew one thing. He needed food. And she had money. It wasn't complicated. Saturday afternoons in Atlanta had a particular sound. It was not just noise. It was impatience. Shopping carts rattling against metal rails. Children whining for candy near checkout aisles. Phones ringing with urgency that felt exaggerated. People sighing loudly, as if the universe personally delayed them. Inside Greenridge Market on Fairburn Road, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled like bread, detergent, and exhaustion. Register 6 had the longest line. At the very front stood a man no one noticed, until they needed someone to blame. He was tall but slightly stooped, like someone who had carried invisible weight for too long. His jacket was brown, worn at the elbows. His trousers were clean but creased from age, not style. His shoes were polished, but old. In his basket, a 5-pound bag of rice. 2 cans of beans. Cooking oil. A loaf of wheat bread. 3 tomatoes. 1 onion. Basic food. The kind bought by people calculating every dollar. His name was Tavian Cairo DeLon. But nobody in that line knew that. To them, he was just another ordinary man holding up Saturday. He placed his items gently onto the conveyor belt. The cashier, a young woman with calm eyes and steady hands, began scanning. Beep. 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 Behind him, someone exhaled dramatically. Can this line move any slower? The voice belonged to Seraphine Cade. Her perfume arrived before her presence. Expensive scent. Sharp tone. Designer handbag tucked under her arm like a trophy. She checked her phone again. 11:48 a.m. She had a nail appointment at 12:30. Life was unfair. Meanwhile, Tavian stared quietly at the display screen as the total climbed. $23.47. The cashier looked up at him. That'll be $23.47, sir. He nodded. Reached into his jacket pocket. Paused. Checked again. His fingers moved slower the second time. Then his trousers. Left side. Right side. Inside lining. His brow tightened slightly. A small breath left him. Thursday arrived quietly. No applause. No cameras. No viral headlines. Just a cloudy afternoon and the smell of roasted coffee beans drifting from a small cafe on Jonesboro Road. The cafe was nothing special. 4 wooden tables. A chalkboard menu written in uneven handwriting. Soft jazz playing from an old speaker. A bell above the door that rang when someone entered. It was the kind of place people overlooked. Which is exactly why Adarinsula liked it. She arrived 20 minutes early. Not because she was eager. But because she was careful. She wore her best dress, a simple sunflower yellow cotton piece she had owned for 3 years. Ironed twice that morning. She braided her hair neatly. No heavy makeup. Just lip gloss. She sat in the corner booth and folded her hands in her lap. Her heart beat faster than usual. Not because he was wealthy. But because uncertainty is louder than wealth. She didn't know what this was. A thank you meeting? Charity? Curiosity? Or something else? The bell above the door rang. She looked up. He entered alone. No driver. No suit. Dark jeans. Plain navy sweater. Old wristwatch. Ordinary. He scanned the room until he saw her. Their eyes met. He smiled. Not the controlled smile of a businessman. But the small, almost shy smile of a man unsure of his footing. I'm glad you came, he said. I wasn't sure you would, she replied. They both laughed softly. The tension loosened. He ordered 2 coffees. Black for himself. Light cream for her, he remembered from the grocery store when she had mentioned it casually. She noticed. And she noticed that he noticed her noticing. Small things matter. They sat. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he broke the silence. You work too much. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. You don't even know me. I know your hands. She looked at them instinctively. They were slightly rough. Calloused from cleaning chemicals and grocery bags. I saw how tired they were, he said gently. People who don't work hard don't carry hands like that. She studied him carefully. You came to test people. Yes. And I was part of your experiment. The words weren't angry. But they were direct. He nodded. I was. Silence lingered. Does that upset you? He asked. She leaned back. No. He blinked. No? I understand why you did it. Most people wouldn't. She gave a small shrug. When you've been hurt enough, you start trying to measure the world before it measures you. That sentence hit him harder than she realized. He looked at her for a long moment. You're very perceptive. I've had to be. The coffee arrived. Steam rose between them like something sacred. He stirred his slowly. I've made a lot of money in my life, he began. But I've lost trust. She didn't interrupt. Didn't rush to comfort him. She simply listened. I've been with women who loved the comfort. The lifestyle. The status. He smiled faintly. None of them loved the man who used to mend fishing nets with his father. She tilted her head slightly. You still see yourself as that boy. I am that boy. Good. He looked surprised. Good. If you ever stop being that boy, you'll lose what makes you real. He laughed softly. You're not intimidated by wealth. She met his eyes calmly. I'm intimidated by character flaws. Money doesn't scare me. He leaned back. Studied her more deeply now. What scares you? She hesitated. Not because she didn't know. But because truth is vulnerable. Failing my brother. He didn't expect that. She continued. When my parents died, I didn't get to say goodbye. I couldn't protect them. I couldn't even attend their funeral. Her voice wavered slightly. But I can protect my brother. And if I fail him, I don't know if I'll forgive myself. He felt something shift inside his chest. This wasn't performance. This wasn't manipulation. This was real. What does he want to become? He asked. An engineer. He loves machines. Takes apart broken radios and puts them back together. Tavian smiled slowly. I used to take apart engines. Her eyes lit up. You? Yes. My father hated it. Said I'd ruin something we couldn't afford to replace. She laughed. I know that fear. They talked for an hour. Then 2. Then 3. About childhood memories. About immigration. About the loneliness of being strong for too long. At one point, he said quietly. I didn't forget my wallet. I know, she replied. You knew? When you pulled out your phone, I noticed the inside pocket wasn't empty. It moved differently. He stared at her. And you still gave the money? Yes. Why? Because your test was about you. My choice was about me. That sentence settled deeply between them. He had never heard anyone frame it that way. You didn't give because you thought I was poor. No. Then why? Because you looked embarrassed. And I refuse to let embarrassment be someone's last feeling in a room if I can help it. The cafe felt smaller now. Quieter. Like the world had narrowed to just 2 people speaking honestly. He reached for his cup but didn't drink. I don't want to overwhelm you, he said carefully. I don't want to turn this into a rescue story. You don't need rescuing. She smiled gently. Good. Because I don't. I'd like to see you again. She didn't answer immediately. Not playing hard to get. Just evaluating. You're not trying to repay me. No. You're not trying to reward me. No. You're not trying to own me. His jaw tightened slightly. Never. She nodded slowly. Then we can have coffee again. The relief in his eyes was subtle. But real. Outside, rain began to fall lightly. Soft against the windows. Neither rushed to leave. When they finally stood, he didn't reach for her hand. He didn't lean too close. He simply said. Thursday next week? She nodded. Thursday. He walked her to the bus stop. She noticed that he didn't offer to buy her a car. Didn't offer to move her out of her apartment. Didn't offer to solve her life. And strangely, that meant more than any grand gesture could have. Because he wasn't trying to become her answer. He was trying to become her equal. As the bus pulled away, she watched him in the rearview mirror. Standing there. Hands in pockets. Not powerful. Not dominant. just thoughtful. For the first time in years, hope did not feel dangerous. And for the first time in years, Tavian DeLon did not feel alone in a room full of his own success. Seraphine Cade had never been invisible before. She was the kind of woman who entered rooms expecting attention. Sharp heels. Sharper tone. Louder opinions. She worked as a regional sales manager for a fast-growing beauty supply chain across Georgia. She made good money, not billionaire money, but enough to build the image she carefully maintained. Leased Lexus. Luxury apartment she could barely afford. Designer bags bought in installments. Brunch photos posted with captions about soft life and never settling. Her entire identity was built on perception. Looking successful. Looking superior. Looking above. That Saturday in Greenridge Market, when she called a stranger, homeless, loud enough for half the store to hear, she didn't think twice. Cruelty had become casual for her. Not because she was born cruel, but because somewhere along the way, she began measuring her worth by how far she stood above others. And when Tavian revealed who he was, the humiliation didn't hit immediately. It hit later. When the video surfaced, someone in the grocery store had recorded everything. From the moment Tavian checked his pockets, to the moment Seraphine said, "Some of us aren't stupid enough to throw money at strangers," to the reveal. The Mercedes. The card. The applause. Within 48 hours, the video had over 18 million views. The headline read, "Woman humiliates poor man, finds out he owns the building." Comments flooded in. Cruel comments. Merciless comments. She represents everything wrong with society. Imagine insulting someone for being broke. She thought she was better. Look at her now. The internet does not forgive quickly. And it does not forget. Seraphine's face was clear in the video. Her voice unmistakable. Her company was tagged. Her LinkedIn profile shared. Her Instagram flooded with strangers calling her arrogant, heartless, entitled. She tried to ignore it at first. Then she tried to defend herself. She posted a tearful apology video. "I was having a bad day. That's not who I am. Please understand." But the comments were relentless. A bad day doesn't create cruelty. It reveals it. 2 days later, she was called into a meeting at her office. The conference room felt colder than usual. 3 executives sat across from her. One of them cleared his throat. "Seraphine, the board has reviewed the situation." She already knew. "We've received over 600 complaints." It was one moment, she argued. One moment. And in that one moment, you represented us. Silence. "We're terminating your contract effective immediately." The words landed heavy. "You're firing me over a grocery store incident?" "No. We're firing you over public behavior that contradicts our values." Values. She wanted to laugh. Companies talk about values until profit is threatened. She left the building that afternoon carrying a box with framed photos and a desk plant she never watered. Her phone buzzed constantly. But not with support. With mockery. Her so-called brunch friends stopped replying. Invitations disappeared. When the Lexus payment bounced 2 weeks later, the dealership repossessed it quietly at 3 a.m. She watched from her window as it was towed away. Her apartment lease renewal notice arrived shortly after. Increased rent. Without her salary, it was impossible. She moved into a smaller unit across town. No concierge. No marble countertops. Just plain walls and silence. For the first time in years. She was the one counting dollars carefully. She was the one calculating groceries. She was the one waiting in lines. And humiliation feels different when it is yours. One afternoon, about 3 months after the video, she stood in another grocery store. Not Greenridge. She avoided that one. She picked up basics. Rice. Beans. Bread. Milk. At checkout, the total was higher than she expected. She was short $4.12. Her stomach tightened. The man behind her shifted impatiently. "I'll just remove the bread," she told the cashier quietly. As the cashier reached to take it back, she remembered something. A voice. Her own voice. "What is this? A homeless shelter?" Shame burned up her neck. It wasn't about losing the job. Or the car. Or the apartment. It was about realizing she had become the very thing she once despised, someone who measured people by appearance. She left the store with less food than she needed. Walked home slowly. And for the first time in her life, she cried without makeup. Not dramatic tears. Not performative tears. Just quiet grief. Because ego had cost her everything. And no amount of branding could fix character. Meanwhile, back at Greenridge Market, Adarinsula kept working. She did not quit. Even though Tavian offered. "You don't have to work 2 jobs anymore," he said gently one Thursday. "I know," she replied. "But this place reminds me of who I am." He respected that. Kindness grounded her. Wealth did not change her rhythm. But fate was not finished. 6 months after the viral video. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Seraphine walked back into Greenridge Market. Different hair. Simpler clothes. No designer bag. Just a canvas tote. She hesitated near the entrance. Part of her wanted to turn around. But rent was due. And Greenridge had better discounts. She walked the aisles slowly. Picked up only essentials. Kept her eyes low. And when she reached checkout, her breath caught. Register 6. Adarinsula. Their eyes met. Silence stretched. Recognition. Memory. Humiliation. Seraphine almost left her basket and walked out. But hunger is stronger than pride. She stepped forward. Placed her items down. Adarinsula scanned them quietly. No judgment in her face. No smirk. No superiority. Just calm. "That'll be $14.82. Seraphine opened her purse. Counted slowly. Short by $3. Her throat tightened. I'll remove the bread." The same word she once used to belittle someone else. Remove. Before she could move it back, Adarinsula reached into her apron. Pulled out a $5 bill. Placed it on the counter. "It's fine." Seraphine froze. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "After everything. After the insult. After the humiliation. After the viral storm. Why?" Adarinsula looked at her gently. "You need food." The same tone. The same calm. "I have money. It's not complicated." Tears fell before Seraphine could stop them. "I was horrible to you. We all have moments we're not proud of." "No. I was cruel." "Yes." The honesty startled her. But cruelty doesn't have to be permanent. That sentence broke something open inside Seraphine. Because redemption feels impossible until someone offers it. She took her groceries. And for the first time in her life, she said thank you without ego attached. Sometimes the fall is necessary. Not to destroy you, but to show you who you've become. Seraphine didn't regain her old lifestyle. She didn't return to status. But she did gain something she never had before. Humility. And humility is the soil where real character grows. Meanwhile, Tavian and Adarinsula's story was deepening quietly. Not in headlines. Not in viral clips. But in small, steady Thursdays. And something neither of them expected was beginning to feel possible. Love. Love did not arrive for them like fireworks. It arrived like sunrise. Gradual. Unannounced. Certain. Thursday became sacred. Not because it was glamorous. But because it was consistent. Every Thursday at 3:30 p.m., Tavian would arrive at the small cafe on Jonesboro Road. No driver. No suit. No display of power. Just him. And every Thursday, Adarinsula would walk in with a notebook tucked under her arm, accounting notes, scribbled calculations, future plans written in the margins. At first, they talked about safe things. Childhood memories. Cultural differences. Food. Weather. But as weeks passed, conversations deepened. One afternoon, he asked quietly. "When was the last time someone took care of you?" She didn't answer immediately. She stared into her coffee. "I don't remember." That wasn't dramatic. It was honest. Since her parents died, she had become the caretaker. Provider. Protector. Planner. There was no room left for softness. He nodded slowly. "I don't want to rescue you." "Good," she replied. "I want to support you." She studied him carefully. There was a difference. Rescuing creates dependency. Supporting creates strength. "What does that look like?" she asked. "It looks like investing in your dream without owning it." That sentence lingered between them. A week later, he showed up with a folder. He placed it on the table gently. She looked suspicious. "What is this?" "Your tuition statement." Her jaw tightened slightly. "I can handle my school fees." "I know. I don't want charity." "It's not charity." He opened the folder. Inside was a simple agreement. A loan document. No interest. No pressure. Repayment timeline flexible. "I'm not giving you money," he said calmly. "I'm investing in someone I believe in." She scanned the pages carefully. "You trust me to pay this back?" "Yes." "Why?" "Not a job. Mentorship." He told her clearly. "I don't want to hire you because you're with me. I want you to earn your position wherever you choose to go." She respected that more than any gift. One Thursday evening, rain poured heavily. The cafe was nearly empty. Lightning flashed briefly against the window. Adarinsula looked tired. More than usual. He noticed. "What's wrong?" She hesitated. "Rent is increasing next month." "By how much?" $150. "That's manageable." "For you." Silence. She wasn't accusing. Just stating reality. He leaned forward. "Let me help." She shook her head. "No." "Why?" "Because I need to know I can survive without you." The words were not rejection. They were boundary. And Tavian respected boundaries deeply. He nodded. "Then let's find a solution together." That night, they didn't discuss romance. They discussed budgeting strategies. Additional certification opportunities. Freelance bookkeeping options she could do remotely. He didn't solve her problem. He strategized with her. And that made all the difference. Weeks turned into months. Something subtle shifted. They began sitting closer. Their hands brushed occasionally. Not rushed. Not urgent. Just natural. One evening, as they left the cafe, he said quietly, "I'm afraid." She stopped walking. Of what? Of needing you. That vulnerability surprised her. Why does that scare you? Because everything I've ever needed has eventually cost me. She stepped closer. Not dramatically. Just enough. I'm not here to take from you. And I'm not here to own you. The space between them felt charged. But steady. He reached for her hand gently. She didn't pull away. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't cinematic music. It was quiet agreement. And quiet agreements last longer. 3 months after their first coffee, Adarinsula completed her final accounting exams. Top of her class. When her name was called at graduation, Tavian sat in the front row. Armand beside him. Maliko on the other side, clapping harder than anyone. When she walked across the stage, she searched the audience. Found him. He wasn't cheering loudly. He was simply smiling. Proud. After the ceremony, she approached him. "You didn't have to come." "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Because you showed up for a stranger in a grocery store. Showing up for you is the least I can do." She laughed softly. And for the first time, she leaned into him without hesitation. Love had formed. Not from rescue. Not from need. But from respect. From shared struggle. From consistent presence. And Tavian realized something quietly one night as he drove home alone. He no longer felt lonely in his mansion. Because loneliness doesn't disappear when someone moves in. It disappears when someone understands you. But there was one moment left. One final circle to complete. And it would involve $23.47 once again. It wasn't the mansion. It wasn't a rooftop. It wasn't Paris. It wasn't a yacht. Tavian chose the same cafe. The same corner booth. The same wooden table where she once said, "Your test was about you. My choice was about me." Because love, when it's real, does not need spectacle. It needs memory. That Thursday, the sky was clear. Late afternoon sunlight poured softly through the cafe window. Adarinsula arrived 5 minutes late, breathless. "I'm sorry, traffic was." "You're fine," he said gently. But there was something different about him. Calmer. Intentional. She noticed immediately. "You look serious." "I am." She sat down slowly. "Is everything okay?" "Yes." He reached into his coat pocket. Not rushed. Not nervous. Just deliberate. He placed a small velvet box on the table. She stared at it. Didn't open it. Just looked at him. "What is this?" "A reminder." "Of what?" "Of the day you changed my life." Her throat tightened. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band. No massive diamond. No dramatic centerpiece. Just elegant gold. But inside the band, engraved clearly, 23.47. She blinked. And then her hand flew to her mouth. "You remembered. I will never forget." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know what that number means to me?" She shook her head, eyes already glossy. "It's the cost of rice and beans." He smiled softly. "No. It's the cost of pride dying. The cost of ego collapsing. The cost of loneliness ending. The cost of me realizing that love doesn't perform." His voice grew quieter. $23.47 is the first time in my adult life someone gave to me without calculating what they'd gain. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them. He continued. I have signed billion-dollar contracts. I have negotiated port acquisitions across continents. I have closed deals that made headlines. He paused. But none of them moved me like that receipt. He reached for her hand. I don't want to marry the woman who paid for my groceries. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. He smiled. I want to marry the woman who didn't hesitate. Silence filled the space between them. The cafe noise faded into the background. I am not asking you because I can provide. I am asking you because I finally feel seen. He inhaled slowly. Adarinsula Valles, will you marry me? She didn't answer immediately. Not because she was unsure. But because she was overwhelmed. For years, she had been the strong one. The responsible one. The one who held everyone else together. And now, someone was choosing her. Not because she needed saving. Not because she impressed him. But because she was kind when it cost her. She laughed softly through tears. You didn't forget your wallet. No. You forgot your fear. He smiled. Yes. She nodded slowly. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. Then stronger. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Not because of wealth. But because he had paid attention. She looked down at the number inside the band again. 23.47. That number, he said quietly, will be the foundation of everything we build. She leaned across the table and kissed him gently. Not dramatic. Not for an audience. Just real. The cafe owner, who had watched quietly from behind the counter, wiped her eyes discreetly. Outside, life moved normally. Cars passed. People walked. But inside that small cafe, two lives permanently shifted. Later that evening, he drove her home. They didn't blast music. They didn't speak loudly. They simply held hands across the center console. At her apartment door, she turned to him. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if I ever change, if money ever changes me, you'll remind me of Register 6. He nodded immediately. And if I ever forget who I was before wealth, remind me of that grocery store line. Deal. They sealed it with quiet laughter. Across town, Zeraphine sat alone in her smaller apartment. Scrolling less. Thinking more. She had started a new job recently. Entry-level. At another grocery chain. Irony had a sense of humor. And for the first time in her life, she treated customers gently. Because humiliation had taught her what pride never could. Meanwhile, Tavian called his mother in Senegal. When he told her about the proposal, she was silent for a long time. Then she began to cry softly. Mama? She is the girl from my dream. What dream? The small stall in the market. The one with real nourishment. He smiled. You were right. I am old, she replied gently. But I still see clearly. Love had come quietly. Without cameras. Without negotiation. Without strategy. It came in the form of a $20 bill and loose change. And now it wore a gold band engraved with numbers most people would overlook. But the story wasn't finished. Because destiny loves full circles. And one final moment remained. Most people expected a ballroom. Crystal chandeliers. White roses imported from Europe. A guest list filled with politicians and CEOs. After all, Tavian Cairo Delon could afford to rent entire resorts if he wanted to. But when reporters began speculating about the billionaire wedding, he gave no interviews. Because the wedding was never about status. It was about origin. And origins matter. 3 months after the proposal, Tavian walked into Greenridge Market again. This time not in worn clothes. Not in a suit either. Just calm confidence. He met with the store manager privately. "I'd like to rent the store." The manager blinked. "For what event?" "A wedding." Silence. "In the store?" "Yes." "At Register 6. Word spread quietly among staff. Shock. Excitement. Confusion. But Tavian was serious. "This is where my life changed," he explained. "If I'm going to promise forever to her, it should be where she first gave without fear." The manager agreed. "On one condition. No media circus." Tavian smiled. "Agreed." The wedding was scheduled for a Sunday evening after closing. At 6 p.m., the shelves were gently moved aside. Produce bins shifted back. Shopping carts lined neatly against walls. String lights were hung carefully from ceiling beams. Soft white fabric draped across the checkout lanes. Register 6 remained exactly where it always stood. Not polished differently. Not redesigned. Just honored. 50 chairs were placed between aisles. Simple. Intimate. Intentional. Guests arrived quietly. No paparazzi. No flashing cameras. Just family and those who mattered. Maliko stood proudly near the front, adjusting his tie nervously. Armand stood beside Tavian, smiling like a proud uncle. Several grocery store employees sat in the front row. The elderly man who first started clapping months ago was invited. He wore his best suit. Zeraphine was invited too. She hesitated for days before responding. But she came. In a simple navy dress. No designer label. Just humility. She sat quietly in the third row. At 6:30 p.m., soft instrumental music filled the store. Not grand. Just gentle piano. Tavian stood near Register 6. Not towering. Not dominant. Just waiting. When Adarinsula entered, the entire room stilled. She wore a simple ivory gown. Elegant but not extravagant. Her hair braided softly around her crown. No heavy jewelry. Just the gold band already resting on her finger. She walked slowly down the aisle formed between shelves of rice and canned goods. And somehow, it felt more sacred than any cathedral. Because sacredness is not in architecture. It is in meaning. Maliko walked her halfway. Then Tavian met them. They stood behind Register 6. The same place where $23.47 once changed everything. The officiant smiled gently. "We gather here not in a palace, but in a place of ordinary miracles." A soft ripple of emotion moved through the room. Tavian spoke first. "I, Tavian Cairo Delon, take you, Adarinsula Valles." His voice remained steady. "I promise you rice when life is simple. Beans when things are hard. And bread when we need comfort." Soft laughter. Tears followed. "I promise you honesty before pride. Humility before ego. And to never forget that love began with $23.47. Adarinsula smiled through tears. When it was her turn, she inhaled slowly. "I, Adarinsula Valles, take you, Tavian. I promise to love the fisherman's son, not the billionaire." A soft murmur of appreciation moved through the guests. "I promise to remind you of who you were before wealth. And to never let success make us strangers to kindness." She paused. "And I promise to always carry $23.47 in my purse, just in case." The entire room laughed gently through tears. Even Zeraphine smiled, wiping her eyes quietly. The rings were exchanged. Gold. Simple. Engraved. The officiant closed with one final sentence. May your wealth never exceed your compassion. And just like that, they were married. After the ceremony, the store lights dimmed slightly. Food was served, simple dishes. Rice. Grilled chicken. Fresh bread. Homemade desserts brought by employees. No 5-course plated meals. Just warmth. Maliko gave a short speech. He cleared his throat nervously. My sister once skipped dinner so I could eat. His voice shook slightly. She carried more than anyone knew. He looked at Tavian. And this man didn't try to carry her for her. He stood beside her. He swallowed. That's real love. Applause filled the store again. Not loud. But sincere. Zeraphine approached Adarinsula quietly later that evening. I didn't know if I should come. I'm glad you did. I was awful to you. You were hurting, Adarinsula replied gently. Zeraphine shook her head. No. I was arrogant. Silence. I work as a cashier now, Zeraphine admitted softly. Adarinsula smiled gently. Then you understand. Yes. Tears filled Zeraphine's eyes again. But I'm grateful. For what? For being humbled before I became someone I couldn't recognize. They hugged briefly. No drama. Just healing. Later that night, after guests left and shelves were returned to their places, Tavian and Adarinsula stood alone inside the store. Register 6 still humming softly. He looked around slowly. Who would have thought? She smiled. That embarrassment would become blessing? He nodded. Or that hunger would become home? They stood in silence. Holding hands. In the place where judgment once echoed. Now filled with memory. Months later. Adarinsula launched her own accounting firm. Small at first. 2 clients. Then 5. Then 15. Her first long-term contract? Greenridge Market. She refused to charge them full price. This store is family, she insisted. Maliko was accepted into Georgia Tech on scholarship. Engineering. Just like he dreamed. Tavian didn't celebrate with headlines. He celebrated quietly at home with homemade rice and beans. As for Zeraphine, she continued working humbly. And every time a customer fumbled for their wallet, she said gently, take your time. Because sometimes the loudest lessons echo the longest. And if you walk into Greenridge Market today, you might still see Register 6. You might still see a small plaque near the counter that reads, kindness costs less than judgment. And somewhere, inside 2 matching gold rings, the number 23.47 still shines. Before you leave, I want you to think about something. If you were standing in that line, would you have judged? Watched? Or given? Because life doesn't always test us in big moments. Sometimes it tests us with $23.47. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that kindness still matters, then don't just scroll away. Backhand index pointing right, like this video so more people can see it. Backhand index pointing right, comment 23.47 if you believe kindness always comes back. Backhand index pointing right and subscribe, because every week we tell stories that remind you what really makes someone rich. Remember, the biggest wallet in the room isn't the most powerful thing. The biggest heart is. I'll see you in the next story.